For Chevron, we see it as both decarbonization of our existing assets through CCUS, could be hydrogen and other technologies, as well as growing a third-party CCUS business to help decarbonize other sectors of the economy.
Welcome to an episode of Strategic Conversations. We host insightful discussions with top business leaders. Today, we are privileged to host Mr. Chris Powers, the Vice President for Carbon Capture, Utilization, and Storage for Chevron. Mr. Powers will be a speaker at the Houston Strategy Forum's upcoming Carbon Symposium, and we are really excited to host him. I am Ravi, the president of the Houston Strategy Forum and author of the management and leadership book, How Cohesive is Your Company, and author of the book, Happy Soul, Hungry Mind. Strategic Conversation is hosted by the Houston Strategy Forum. If you value these conversations, please hit like and subscribe to the Houston Strategy Forum's YouTube channel. Today's episode is sponsored by Cohegic Management Consulting and Executive Coaching Firm. Thank you for joining us, and we are looking forward to a great discussion with Mr. Chris Powers. Chris, thank you, sir. Thank you for taking time to be session today.
Hey, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Ravi.
Absolutely, sir. Let's jump right into it, Chris. Carbon management has come into a lot of focus among companies and countries, right? As the world wakes up to the effects of climate change and the emissions of carbon dioxide and other emissions. And there is a whole amount of effort being put in the area of carbon management. What is the state of the union? What is the current state? Where do you see that we're making a lot of progress? And where do you see that we need to still redouble our efforts? Because one of the things that is clear is that we need a sense of urgency, and we need a lot of effort to drive this to global scale, right? So how do we do that? So where are we making progress, and where do we need to make a lot more progress? What is your sense of it, sir?
Yeah, well, Ravi, again, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about this topic. For sure, carbon management is top of mind, I think, for everybody these days. The reality is, as we look forward into the energy transition, our view is that it's going to take all forms of energy for us to proceed ahead as a society, right? And there's 2 billion people that are still in some amount of energy poverty, and they aspire to have the same standard of living as everybody else. That said, we also have to tackle the dual challenge of carbon management as we look ahead over the next several decades. So our view is that it's going to take everybody working together in a partnership to tackle this challenge. And carbon management, we believe, a large portion of which will come through CCUS, is going to be a critical piece of that puzzle.
And so for my audience members who do not understand CCUS, would you help us understand what that is?
Yeah, absolutely happy to do that. So we think about CCUS as a value chain, and it's a physical and then also ultimately a commercial value chain as well. So it starts with point source emissions, and those could be big key industrial facilities like power plants, like cement manufacturers, like refineries, like chemical plants. You're going to have to capture the CO2 from those point sources, from those flues. And there's a variety of technologies that can achieve that, both ones that we've had for many years and the new technologies that are just progressing through technology readiness levels and into initial deployment. So once you've captured the CO2 from these key industrial facilities, then you have to move on towards transportation. You're ultimately going to have to move the CO2 to an ultimate disposition. Probably small portions of the CO2 can be utilized, in a number of applications. But really, the lion's share of the CO2 is going to ultimately have to go through to long-term storage. And so what that looks like is you can target putting the CO2 in either saline aquifers or in depleted oil and gas formations. And then you inject it in operations that look a bit like traditional oil field operations. And then we'll have long-term stewardship of the CO2 underground over time.
Yes, and I appreciate you explaining that it's extracting or it's capturing the CO2, which would normally have escaped into the atmosphere from these industrial locations, whether it's power generation or other manufacturing, and taking that CO2 and transporting it and then storing in places like the Gulf of Mexico. And do you think that companies are beginning to recognize across the industrial cycle? Do you see that companies have changed their thinking, that they see this as a priority to run their operations? There was a time when safety became commonplace, right? And it became culturally accepted in companies. I mean, now it's part of the fabric. Do you see that carbon management is getting to the point where companies now see that as something that they must do as part of doing business?
Yeah, so first off, I think your safety comment is a good place to start with, and safety is still our number one priority each and every day, and it takes continuous focus to ensure that we have safe and reliable operations day in and day out. That'll continue, but carbon management and decarbonization of our sector, and then decarbonization of broader industries, is increasing in focus. Absolutely. I think that it's a bit of an evolving space in terms of how each company is thinking about it.
Yes.
For Chevron, we see it as both decarbonization of our existing assets through CCUS, could be hydrogen and other technologies, as well as growing a third-party CCUS business to help decarbonize other sectors of the economy.
Yes. And where do you see the cost curve heading? Because, I suspect as companies look at this, I know there are tax incentives that the government is giving for companies who are able to capture their CO2. So there is a tax incentive there. But if we think about this problem without the tax incentive, then where do you see that cost curve? At what point does it become a no-brainer for companies to go, yes? It's like you say, all right, at some point, that, like I said, it becomes part of the strategic equation, and nobody has to give thought and say, well, do we do this or not? Well, if you're going to build a new plant, or if you have an existing plant, then this becomes a given. How do I get to that cost point where boards and executive management don't have to think too much about this, right? Is that possible, or am I dreaming?
Yeah, great question. A couple of thoughts. I'll start with our view on carbon. We believe at my company, at Chevron, that well-designed policies, well-designed regulatory frameworks are critical enablers to help these sort of ecosystems develop. We've supported a price on carbon for quite a while now, and believe that ultimately will drive the most efficient and effective solutions to the decarbonization problem. So that's sort of point one. Maybe if you click down from there, three things that I personally view are going to be critical to make this happen and to build that, I'll say, that commercial structure to make this business take off, are policy, innovation, and partnership. Yes. So on policy, if I can talk for a minute on each of those. So policy, it's both the initial, I'll say, fiscal policies like 45Q and LCFS that can get the ball rolling in this industry to create those incentives to get companies to invest. But then there's also sort of the regulatory and permitting types of frameworks that would fall broadly under policy as well. You need to have durable frameworks so that companies can invest with some level of surety as they put significant amounts of capital to work. Then there's innovation. So it's both technology innovation and then commercial innovation. So on the technology innovation, it gets to your point on driving down the cost curve. We have invested in technologies that we believe are going to create a step change reduction in the cost to capture, which will help open up broader segments in the market. And then there's commercial innovation. How do we think across the value chain from emitter to transport to sequester to align incentives? And then last one sort of flows from that is partnership. We think it's going to take everybody working together in lockstep to sort of unlock this ecosystem. And once we sort of get the ball rolling, get the ball moving down the field, I think the system will develop in conjunction with the price of carbon over time.
Yes. Chris, there are so many interesting aspects to this challenge. And I can't wait to host you, sir. Thank you again for being part of the Carbon Symposium that is coming up at the Houston Strategy Forum. In fact, may I ask you this quickly? What do you think are the most pressing things we should discuss at the Carbon Symposium? Thanks to you and the other top executives who are coming together on this powerful panel. Now that we are going to have all of you all in the room, what do you think we should discuss? What would be the most pressing and interesting aspects of the carbon management equation that we should talk about?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. And I've been on a number of panels recently, and I'm really looking forward to the Houston Strategy Forum. Each one develops in its own way. Sort of broadly speaking, I think it's important that we have just start having the discussion to understand what each company brings to the table. If you think about that partnership and that value chain, what does each company bring to the table? Whether you're an operator, maybe you've got capture technology, maybe you're a midstream transporter, maybe you've got capability in reservoir management. Everybody's going to bring different pieces to the puzzle, and sort of having that dialogue and understanding where we fit in and how we can move the ball down the field together, I think is critical. The other thing, which I really love about these sort of forums, is just the opportunity to, I'll say, continue the dialogue externally facing to a broader population base. There's a lot we have to do in the education front to get society at large more comfortable with CCUS and sort of build an understanding that this is critical. Whether you look at IEA or IPCC, all of the sort of, I'll say, neutral bodies have said loud and clear that carbon capture and storage is a critical enabler if we want to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. So just having these forums to have this sort of dialogue and to begin to build that understanding for society at large is absolutely critical.
Wonderful, sir. I love both of your points. We're actually very, very proud of the fact, but more thankful that our panel represents a very broad representation of the industry. So we're excited that will generate a lot of interesting discussion. But to your second point, public perception and public understanding and public, their appreciation of carbon management, because carbon management is not just about industries, it is about consumers too. It is about our lifestyle. And every human being on earth needs to start understanding the value of carbon management. So I look forward to that discussion. Thank you, sir. We're really excited to host you. And looking forward to the Carbon Symposium. Thank you all for joining today. We thank Mr. Chris Powers for taking the time to be here today. Hope you enjoyed the strategic conversation today, and we look forward to seeing you on May 12th at the Houston Strategy Forum. Mr. Powers, thank you, sir, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it as well.